Hey everyone, it's the Nitty Professor. Today's topic is E-Textiles and E-Yarn. Going to do my best with this video. My son wanted me to look after his dogs, and one of them right behind me is over 4 months old, so she's pretty young, so we'll see how this goes. But in any case, so recently, as you know, those of you who've been following me, fiber art is a big topic in my novels. And recently, since I started writing about a blind character who is an artist, I've really been investigating multisensory art. So the overall topic of what I want to look at today, after having read this really interesting scientific article from March 2025, so it's very recent, is how E-Textiles and E-Yarn could impact accessibility in fiber art consumption. I think it's a really interesting topic because blind people in particular are really kind of ignored as an audience for a lot of art. And by extension, a lot of other people with sensory disabilities and sensory impairments are discounted as well. For example, deaf people in music. So I think, I'm as much of a Luddite as a lot of people. Technology, I've always had a lot of skepticism about technology. But the more I delve into the arena of disability, the more I have seen that technology offers access to human experiences, aesthetic experiences as far as like making your life just more meaningful in a way that's really quite important. So my mind is opening. There's some technology that's not good, but there's a lot of technology out there that really is quite good. And it's a question of us just using our hearts as human beings in order to figure out what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. So I think this is a really interesting topic, and I'm just going to kind of go through some just snippets of what I learned as I was writing a chapter on my multisensory artist in book 8, which I'm about a third of the way into. So there is such a thing as sensory interactive fiber and textiles. This is what really interested me. I'm not necessarily interested in turning my t-shirt into a smartphone where I can be spied on all the more easily. I don't necessarily want to use my clothing to monitor myself, but sensory interaction, that's what I'm interested in. And I'm also interested in pursuing this question with respect to the whole idea of yarn, because I have never seen e-yarn for sale in a yarn store. Wouldn't it be interesting, though, if there was a place for that? So it's worth a question. So there's such a thing as immersive, interactive expression in textiles, intelligent textiles, sort of as an overall basic kind of phenomenon. I'm looking at my notes here as I'm talking. There are functions in sensing, communication, and actuation that are all a part of this. And as a basic overall phenomenon, interactive textiles can convert light, moisture, pH, etc. into things like color, fluorescence, and different shapes, and also they can have a chemical impact too. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. It's been going on for a while. Even from just like a simple standpoint of those silly Christmas sweaters that have some kind of like an electrode embedded and it says, lights up and it says some silly thing. The basic overall trajectory of what I'm looking at here is going from science and engineering to art and enjoyment and meaning. The incorporation of flexible electronics allows for the development of, for example, chromic yarn. For example, a current can travel through the yarn, generating heat and changing its color. Now that's kind of interesting. I mean, could you imagine, like, if I was knitting this scarf and I had yarn that changed color based on the temperature? And we're familiar with things like that, right? There are things that we know of that you can touch, it changes its color. But I haven't seen yarn do that yet. It could be kind of cool. Like, if I could knit a sweater and that could be like a part of it, like, you put your hand on it, leaves a print, or just changes its color maybe from the winter to the summer, or if the sun comes out, or different yarns change their colors differently. It could be a lot of fun to think about. Then there's such a thing as photoluminescent materials, which use fluorescence and fiber optics to change light and color. You can even, you can embroider designs into things. You can dye designs into things that have, like, maybe a patch that would have a name on it and it would change color, or it would fluoresce in the dark, for example, that kind of thing. Then there's such a thing as mechanoluminescence, which changes its color or light in response to mechanical stresses like pressing on it or friction or something like that. And I was thinking about that with the murals that I have going into my novels, where if you wanted to have increased sensory interaction, if, say, a kid touches a certain part of the crocheted mural and it changed color, that would be interactive and it would excite the child and want them to be more involved. You know, so much of our art is kind of an issue because we can't touch it. And it's deemed so valuable, you know, that God forbid fingerprints should show up on it. And then, we reduce everything to monetary worth instead of, well, what if we prioritized human experience with that piece of art? And we assumed that it was going to wear out because, yes, people were touching it, people were interacting it, like clothing, and it wasn't going to exist forever. And by the way, who the hell cares what money it brings in, right? Trying to bracket the whole monetary aspect of things. And I understand we're stuck in this monetary system, but sometimes it's just nice to dream away from that and assume that maybe, there's grant funding or something that makes this accessible for a temporary time. People really enjoy the crap out of it and they get way more out of it than they would if they were only ever allowed to see it. And then it goes away and we're all the better off for it. Chromatic fibers can change color in response to light and temperature, mechanical force, or even electrical signals, which is kind of interesting. I mean, I could see like static playing a role for that. It's useful for displays, but in art, there are a lot of times when art, we want to have a message. And so maybe under certain circumstances, the message could suddenly luminesce, or it could fluoresce, or it could light up. And then the viewer would be like, whoa, wait, what's going on? It's like way more interactive because now I'm having an impact on the art. I'm not just passively standing by and looking at it. It is changing in response to like my breath or my presence or my shadow falling on it or my touch or, whatever it is. And then the art is, I'm like contributing to making this art what it is. It's interactive. I just think it's a wonderful idea. We'll make it more accessible. Some other things, you can put surface coatings on fabric to enable it to change color in response to temperature changes. So there are chemicals that can be added. Hopefully they're safe, right? We don't know. A lot of this is really experimental. Like I say, the article that I read is from March 2025, and part of what the article was doing was sort of reporting on the status of the industry and directions, like a paradigm for future research. But I really like speculating, especially, again, yarn. Like, there is fluorescent yarn. I've seen it. You can get yarn that will glow in the dark. And I think it would be cool to get yarn that would change its properties in response to, so I knit a sweater and I touch it and then it changes its quality. But there's more than just visual effects that are going into this. And that's why I thought this article was cool. So it goes into an area, and I'm going to be frank, I had trouble following the whole argument about the haptic fiber. I just wrote a few notes on here. I looked up some stuff and I was kind of lost. There was some designer who had something to do with haptic feedback that was providing interactive instruction in singing arias for an opera. And I didn't dig deep enough to really understand it, but I think I might at some point. I would look into haptic feedback systems, but there are shape memory fibers that can adjust their structure in response to the environment, and they can help regulate heat and humidity. So what if the shape, again, what if the shape of the fabric alters itself in response to, like, again, somebody breathing on it, or maybe somebody like singing or speaking near it, or somebody touches it and it like curls up, or it flattens out, or it changes its structure. So it's apparently these haptic feedback systems, they do react to the environment, but we can be in the environment, right? And then, oh, my son's back. He might come run here and get his dog. But in any case, the next section, really interesting, auditory interaction. Yeah, you hear him, don't you? You hear him, Moxie. Yeah, this is Moxie. Auditory interaction, audio feedback. I'm trying to get at my notes here. The interaction enhances the user's emotional experience. And there is such a thing as there is a kind of fabric that is enables the reading of Braille. So as a fabric, it can like sense the Braille input and turn it into auditory output. That was really interesting. As all right. As an accessible kind of technology type of thing. I thought that was fascinating. Also, it can take tiny, imperceptible sounds and convert them into vibrations. So that was kind of interesting. It almost allows you like enhanced access to the auditory environment. Are you having fun? Dogs, especially puppies. Yeah, no, don't eat my knitting. Okay, so now we're getting towards the end here. So this is where it gets really interesting. Olfactory generating technologies. Olfactory. And I was thinking about this. So I had this vision for one of my chapters. Of course, you know, it's romance, right? They're weddings. And I thought it'd be really cool if my blind character, let's say she has a wedding, which she hasn't yet, but let's say there was a way for an olfactory dimension to be built into her wedding gown so that she can have a heightened experience. She can't really see what she has on, but she could smell it. I think that'd be really cool. And apparently people are working on this. There is such a thing as aromatic fibers with blended and composite spinning using microcapsules. And even if it was like what are you doing? A one-use kind of thing, you know, for a wedding, right? Right, Moxie? That could be really cool. And then beyond this, she loves to chew. There is this invention called Sen thread, which uses tubular fragrance storage capacity, like nano storage and conductive yarn and heating technologies and all this kind of stuff. So it's embedded into the fiber through hand embroidery. It's nanotechnology that delivers scent. It's some kind of nano-electronic type of phenomenon where scent is diffused throughout the fabric using these teeny tiny tubes. Can you imagine a dog having that with their strong noses? Yeah. So in any case, I looked up e-yarn too, and there definitely is such a thing. Some of it just has to do with electrical conduction properties. But I would invite your feedback on this whole question of, e-yarn. It's something that we could have in the yarn store that would enhance our access to sensory experience in the clothing and accessory or art or weaving or whatever it is that we make. I think it'd be really cool. So let's just put it this way. I'm going to kind of leave the floor open for comments. You may know some stuff about this that I don't. Maybe you investigate E-Textiles. As soon as I opened the door down to this rabbit hole, I was like, wow, this is really fascinating. Because, again, I'm not as interested in, like, smart fabric per se as I am in how can E-Textiles and e-yarn enhance the accessibility of art to people with sensory deficiencies and enhance our access to sheer fun and enjoyment when we're knitting. Okay, I think the dogs have kind of had it here, so I'm going to call it a day. But I'll look forward to your comments. Y'all take care. Bye.